Hello, my name is David and I recently read The Trifecta of Trust by Joseph Folkman. And he, in the book, tells the story of a time when he was having a conversation with a guy called Bill. And Bill was a very high potential leader. He was good at bringing around change in an organization. He was great at setting stretch goals. And also, he was very good at driving for results. And so in the conversation Joseph has with Bill, he says, I see you as a very high potential leader. But Bill turns around and says, no, that is not the reality. My team are not willing to follow me. And that was because he scored very low in trust. In fact, one of Bill's team members said about him, Bill will get you results regardless of the cost or the dead bodies left behind him. You see, Bill's team knew that he was willing to do anything to get results, and they were terrified that they would be the ones sacrificed for those results. And so it was very interesting that Bill's team had a low engagement rate, and most of them were looking to get jobs outside the organization. In fact, it was quite incredible of how much that had actually been accomplished, because clearly Bill had been doing it on his own. And so in the conversation, Bill eventually sort of said, well, that's just my direct reports. They might not trust me, but other people trust me. My family trusts me. And Joseph said, well, how about you phone your wife, tell her about these results and see if she has any experience of this. Much later, it was a long phone call later, Bill comes back and his wife had told him some truth that actually sometimes she found it difficult to trust him as well. And he wanted to know, what can I do to make myself more trustworthy and how long will it take? Trust is important. Now, Joseph Folkman, for several decades, has done 360-degree assessments, which is looking at people from all the different angles. It's all anonymized to give you a bit of a picture of where people are at. And he's done thousands of them and he's kept the results. So he has millions of data points and he wanted to see was it important. So he looked into the data, millions of data points, thousands of assessments, and something started to come out. And he realized and he discovered just how important trust was. Trust was this added plus that if you had it, it made all of your other skills better. He even said that when you have a trusted leader, people are more engaged. They are willing to give more of their discretionary time and effort. The organizations of high trust organizations, they make more money. The alternative is also true. The inverse is also true. In low trust environments, burnout is higher. Engagement is lower. People use their sick days as holiday days, and most people are looking for an escape. So, trust is important. What's the three things that make it up? Because this is the book, The Trifecta of Trust, so that's three. Well, the three things are having expertise, 2, being consistent, and 3, relationships. So the first one, having expertise. In fact, he tells the story of Jim. Now, Jim was in the R&D department, but he was given a leadership opportunity, a leadership test maybe, of moving into the HR department as sort of a vice president. And in that role, he realized very quickly this team was very capable and the main director, they would take care of things. So he didn't really take too much time to learn what was going on in his department. But he would go along to the meetings and he would make new suggestions of things that they could do. And then he would go back to his team and he would brief them. And he would tell them what had been agreed. And many times they were shocked and they would say, you can't do that. That would be so damaging for us, for the organization. There's no way. And Jim would say, well, go talk to the CEO. That's what he wants now. You can take it up with him. Well, some of his direct line reports, they did. They were brave enough and they went to the CEO and explained why these strategies couldn't be done. And so, in the due course of time, Jim was moved out of that position back to the R&D department. And in fact, he was in a worse position than when he'd started, because now the CEO didn't trust him and the whole HR department didn't trust him either. Why was that? Well, he didn't have the expertise and he hadn't been willing to learn or listen to the people around us. Ultimately, we trust the people that have expertise, that are humble enough to learn from us, but are willing to do that. So if you want to be trusted, the first thing is expertise, doing what it takes to do that, whether that's reading, learning in whatever way you can, become an expert, and that is one of the pillars or one of the trifectas of trust. The second one is consistency. And there was a story of a video from 2017 of a United Airlines flight where they were forcefully and rather violently taking a passenger off the plane. And people were appalled and outraged at the violence, but also hugely disappointed at the inconsistency where one passenger had been forcibly removed, where many others weren't. And so, whilst their stock prices fell and they lost lots of money, millions, billions of dollars, a whole year later after this viral video, they were still rated as the lowest customer service. It had this permanent impact because whilst they may have treated most customers well, nobody knew if they were going to be the customer that wasn't treated well, if they were going to be the passenger that was going to be forcefully removed. And so it matters how you show up, how consistent you are. And he talked about how people that scored very low in consistency, they often thought that 1 in 10 was low. If I'm not consistent 1 out of 10 times, that's not so bad, that's pretty good actually. Well, he gives the example of if in using a saw you had a 1 in 10 chance of losing your finger, would you use that? 10% chance of losing a finger? You wouldn't do that. And so ultimately, consistency is very important. Making those commitments and hitting them all of the time. Very, very important. So that's the second one. Are we consistent in the things we say we're going to do and in actually doing them? And the third one, arguably the most important one, is relationships. He talks about a story from 1949 where I think it was in Montana, and there was a big fire. It was a big wildfire in the grasslands. And Wag Dodge and a team of maybe 15 or 16 firemen were sent out to fight the fire. And as sun was setting, the wind changed, and the fire that was 200 feet high and 300 feet deep started moving straight towards them at 30 miles per hour. Now Wag Dodge knew that this was going to be impossible to outrun. Even though they dumped all their equipment, so he tried to connect with all of the other guys, the 15 other guys, and said, you got to stop running, we got to try something else. But they just carried on. And he was unable to get through to them. But he took a match, he lit the area around him and it went off. And then he went and laid down in the ashes. He got his handkerchief, poured some water on it, covered his mouth, closed his eyes, and just lay there. And the fire passed him. And then afterwards he got back up and he was almost entirely unscathed. It was this moment of inspiration. Many firefighters are taught this now, but nobody did it at the time. But the other guys, the other firefighters, almost all of them died. Many of them from severe, severe burns. What's that got to do with a relationship? Well, that was a team that had come together only very recently before. So they knew he was an expert, but they didn't trust him with their lives because they didn't know him. Relationships are so important for trust. And he gives, in this book, Joseph Folkman gives loads of examples of how you can build relationships, build trusting relationships that help you grow and develop. Ultimately, it's very powerful to see how trust impacts us. And he gives this example of how we perceive people who we trust. You see, unrelated skills are rated higher in the people that we trust. And in the people that we don't trust, those unrelated skills are rated much lower. So what does that mean in working out? Well, you could put hours, days, weeks and months of work into a project. And if people don't trust you, they're not even going to give it a second look. Doesn't matter how hard you've worked, how much quality you've developed there. If people don't trust you, they will dismiss your ideas and your work. And so that's really significant. And so it's really nice that he's given us these 3 handholds of knowledge and expertise, of consistency and relationships that help us build trustworthiness in the people around us. And I coach people. And so if any of these ideas are compelling to you and you want to work on them, get in touch and we can have a conversation to see if we can help you develop in these areas in the ways you would like. That is the message and the essence of what I got from the Trifecta of Trust.